And so the recording will also be uploaded so that you'll have these resources with you. Next slide. For our grounding today, we're going to spend about 10 minutes in breakouts, and we're going to ask you to share your name, school, role, again, where you're zooming in from today, especially if it's something outside of the norm, and then share your favorite school lunch food as a child, whether you got it from the cafeteria or it was something that you packed and brought from home. Get yourself in that cafeteria mindset today. I'm going to People must be having good conversations, fond memories of school lunches. I think now about when I was allowed to, like my mom packed for lunch, and it was a lot of sugar. Fluffernutter and a Swiss cake roll and a juice box would not be good now. Welcome back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed chatting with one another and reminiscing about your school days in the lunchroom. Now we are going to hear from Melissa D'Angelo, who is joining us from Food and Nutrition Services, where she serves as director, to share some ideas from their end about reducing food waste in school and to share with you some of the newest news and initiative from the world of food and nutrition services. Thanks for joining us, Melissa.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks to everyone for being here today, especially if you are not working and you happen to be somewhere really cool, not in Fairfax County. I'm jealous. So welcome and thank you for being here. I found this picture today. I wanted to put a photo of students, and this is the perspective that I usually see students from when I go out to schools and it's during lunch period. This is, the back, this is inside the line, right? This is our perspective, and as we're looking at students, and as you can see, a student was very excited to get their picture taken here, and I wanted to also showcase the salad bar, and where this is an opportunity for students to be able to come in and get unlimited fruits and vegetables. And a lot of our work is around where we get our produce from, who's providing our produce, and then also making sure that students see a colorful variety there, as always. And, moving salad bars from inside the cafeteria then onto the lines have really been able to help us streamline our operations, and students have really transitioned very well. It's the same amount of fruits and vegetables that were provided previously, but now they're on the line, and now we have our staff back in the kitchen, and we're able to just move it a little bit more smoothly and more efficiently. But anyway, I just thought this was a fun picture, so I wanted to share it with you all. So we can go on to the next one. The next slide. So what we're going to talk about today that I wanted to share with you, and the guidance I got today based off of previous conversations and the questions that always come in from, to get to green here. We're going to talk about what OVS is, and we're going to get into that. So you guys hopefully will be able to know what that means in a little bit. Share tables, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about our pursuit in making sure that we obtain as many local products as possible, and also our pursuit in less plastic. And the conversation I was in a little while ago, the room, it came up, and I said, we're going to get there. And I also shared one of the barriers. So we'll be talking about that today as well. And then I'm going to kind of talk you guys through a tale of 3 food items to just then kind of bring it home a little bit as well. And then hopefully you guys can just kind of see what we're trying to do along the way when we're looking at our food items that we have available to students, and then how to work with us and what that looks like. Okay, so next slide. What is OVS? So OVS is offer versus serve. So OVS is a type of service model that is federally mandated and regulated and provides guidance around how to provide food to students. And part or a big piece of why OVS was created was really to be able to reduce food waste. So in order to receive federal funding, FNS must meet USDA regulations and standards. We are very, very highly regulated. Previously, we used to fall under financial services, and the chief, right, was Lee Burden. And Lee would always tell us, you guys are the highest regulated department in all of any school, system or any division, because everything we do has a regulation or a standard behind it. And what I've become to realize is that the awareness or the need to make sure that you guys are aware of that is what really helps, I think, bridge the gap at times when there's miscommunication and misunderstandings, and really trying to figure out ways to partner so then that everybody's on the same page. All food components must be offered when it comes to offer versus serve. We'll dig a little bit into that some more. Students get to decline foods they do not intend to eat, and then also hopefully then reducing food waste, recognizing that that's where if we can prevent students from picking up food that they're not going to eat, then it's not going to be wasted. And then, however, no matter what, whether it's breakfast or lunch, one selection must always be half a cup of fruit and or vegetables. So talking about breakfast, and before we go on to the next slide, so breakfast looks like this. We must offer at least an entree, milk, and fruit. So we do not have we can't get around that, right? We must offer at least the entree, milk, and fruit. And the entree is going to either include a grain and a meat or just the grain. And so usually it's the grain of the meat, especially like in the form of a breakfast sandwich, for instance. But what we do here is we just make sure that we have these items offered. So when we get reviewed, for instance, by VDOE, they will check to make sure that we are offering these options. Students must select one entree and the fruit. So let's talk about cereal and an apple. And then the fruit must be minimum half a cup. So we have to put out there the minimum, and then students have to go ahead and grab at least the fruit being half a cup and at least the entree as well. So hopefully that clears some things up around milk. Is a constant question we get. Milk has to be offered, but students do not have to pick it up. When it comes to lunch, we must offer 5 food components. So students must select 3 different food components, and one of those must also be half a cup of fruit and vegetable. So, and also when it comes to milk, we must also provide at least 2 different types of milk. So that's where you'll see, for instance, the non-fat chocolate. You'll see the 1% unflavored. Sometimes you'll see non-fat unflavored. And so we must offer at least 2 different types of milk. But again, that doesn't mean that students have to grab the milk, but they must select 3 different food components. So they have to get at least 3 different types of food components, and one of them has to be half a cup of fruit and vegetable. It can be very confusing, and there's some times that I have to sit there and like think this through. When I'll get a question and they'll be like, is this a reimbursable meal? Is this a complete meal that students can grab? And I'm like, okay, hold on, let me think this through. And I have to sit because it's not something that's easily understood. It's really when we immerse ourselves through that. And it's not something that we ever expect you all to have to know well, other than, whenever you have questions, reach out to us. But just being aware that when we put things out, those food items out for students, it's because we have to provide those variety of options to students, and they always have to at least grab that half a cup of fruit or vegetable. So next slide. So to go ahead and show you guys a little bit more, so hopefully this just makes it a little bit clearer. So when we're preparing the menu, our menu planning team goes ahead and puts together, it's like, what is this going to look like for students? So here, for instance, we must offer, again, half a cup of fruit. There could be another half a cup of fruit. There would be the milk, and there's the entree. So let's take that through. That could be a whole apple. That could be a banana. Let me rephrase that. That could be a whole fruit, like an apple. It could be juice, right? It would be a milk and then the entree. So again, it could be cereal or it could be a breakfast sandwich. And the student must select at least that half cup fruit. So it could be the juice, for instance, or it could be the apple, for instance, and then the entree. So that just shows you here like what we have to offer and then what a student must have to grab. And if we move on to lunch, next slide. For lunch, we must offer at least the 5 food components. So then you're going to see here the half cup fruit, half cup vegetables, milk, a grain, and then there's the entree, right? Which would then consist of, it could be the grain and or meat alternate. And that's what the MMA means. So you're going to think of, let's say, nachos, for instance, right? So you've got the green, and then you could have the cheese sauce on top of that, or you could have cheese sauce, and then you could have taco meat on it, or beef crumbles that we're going to be putting out this year as well. And then you could also have the milk, and then you would have the salad bar where students have to, or they're provided at least a half a cup of the fruit and vegetables, and then the student must have to select, again, a full component of the fruit and or vegetables to equal at least half a cup. So again, there's the 3 that they would have to at least select. So full component meaning 1 of the full, and then again, half the cup of fruit and or vegetable. So again, milk is not in here where students must select the milk. Students must select at least 3 food components with the half cup of fruit or vegetable that they must select for a complete meal. Okay, so I think we can move on to the next slide. I know I'm seeing a lot of questions come through. We'll get to those in just a bit. So now we're going to jump to share tables. And I know this is kind of a weird transition, but I want to make sure that this is shared. All schools this year are expected to implement some sort of a food waste reduction strategy in their cafeterias. And one of the easiest ones that we have been promoting and making sure that people, or hopefully increasing awareness around, are something called share tables. And so what we do when it comes to share tables is support schools that are interested in collecting that food that students are not going to be consuming. They put it onto a table that's in the cafeteria. I have yet to see a cafeteria that has more than one share table set up. For example, so I've been wondering if that could be something to help also increase this being implemented. But usually there's at least one table where then students know, and there's the signage that we provide, that students then know they can go ahead and put that extra cereal, they can put that extra cheese stick, they can put, that whole banana or that whole fruit that they don't intend, the package of craisins, anything like that that they do not intend to eat. They put that on the table. And then it's up for grabs after that, right? And there's a number of things that can move forward. So it can then be shared within the community, meaning the direct student community. Students could go ahead and say, oh, you know what? I see that banana there, and I know I'm going to be hungry in a couple of hours, so I'm going to grab it. Or I'm going to go ahead and I'm still hungry and I don't feel like going through the line and going back to get fruits and vegetables because, by the way, that is unlimited. Students can go through the line again to get fruits and vegetables at any point, but they don't want to go back through the line. So they say, okay, I'm going to go and grab that banana. I'm going to go ahead and eat it now and add it to my lunch because I don't want to go back through the line, because we understand how that can be time consuming as well. Or another next step would be, you know what, students aren't really picking up from the share table. We're looking at all this food and we don't know what else to do with it. We're going to go ahead and start collecting it for donations. Maybe the high school has a pantry, for instance, or there's a food bank or a food pantry very close to the school. Then that way it can go ahead and be donated. When it comes to that, there is an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, that should probably, it is available and it should be filled out and signed, because that's really a partnership between the school and the food pantry. And one of the barriers there that I've come across is that it can be challenging to collect all that food and get it to the food pantry. And I've spoken to a couple of food pantries and they've let me know that they're like, we are more than willing to pick it up or split the picking, or split up how to get this to us. How about half the time they get it to us and half the time we'll go pick it up? We can work together to figure this out. So that's one thing, or one barrier that has come my way. And then when I have conversations with food banks, they seem to be able to say, like, we can figure this out. Just let us know, because again, we don't want food waste. So if a school's going to do this, for instance, Then what it would look like is the share table sort of becomes more of like a collection bin. And that way, then those extra items could go ahead and then be placed in there. And then that is what then can be shared with the food bank or food pantry. And then the third bullet here would be both, right? You could still be doing the share table, students go and grab that, you're still collecting that extra food, and then it's going in some form or fashion out into the greater community. Another thing that I've seen is elementary schools, especially elementary schools, because we have so many, right? But going ahead and just collecting that food and then having a bin at close to the front doors or out of the exit doors, and students grabbing those extra items and taking them home with them, especially if that school happens to have some sort of a backpack program. So we've had a couple of schools reach out to us and say, hey, can we go ahead and give it out through our backpack programs? And we're like, yes, please, most definitely do so. So there's a variety of ways to go ahead and figure out how to get this food out to the greater community, including our students or the community that they live in. One of the things, though, that we want to make sure that everyone is aware of is that the food waste reduction programs in schools are maintained through each individual school, because it can vary, and they're not maintained by us as in F&S staff, but we are here to support. We are here to help maneuver through those barriers or those challenges, right? And if you reach out and you say, hey, we're just really struggling right here, or we're experiencing this, we feel like we've heard almost every scenario or situation. We are here to help support, because we don't want food waste, right? We want to figure out how to go ahead and eliminate the waste that is associated with getting food to students from the very beginning all the way into bellies of students and the greater community. So please go ahead and reach out. Another barrier that I want to go and share before we move on is around temperature control. So if your school does go ahead and say, we want to go ahead and collect milk and cheese sticks and yogurt, but you're like, we don't have a refrigerator, and how are we going to keep this to temp? So we have some time there. So the rule of thumb is keeping a food product I'm trying to figure out how to say this in regards to temperature control. It has 4 hours without needing to be in temperature control before it goes bad. So say you have lunch service starts at 11 a.m. and a student puts the milk down and it's 11:10. Technically, you have 4 hours before that milk goes bad. But we don't want it to go that long, right? And you're also going to run into the end of service. We are mandated we can only serve lunch between the hours of 10 and 2. So hopefully, right, in regards to how you're creating the share table system or process, you could have students involved, there could be other teachers involved. The health department has also shared interest in having their school health assistants or school health aides being involved, and their public health nurses. So it's also another resource that you could have there as well when you're looking at implementing this. But then you would go ahead and have someone collect that food at some point and then put it into a temperature controlled area if possible. I've had teachers' lounges come up as well, donated refrigerators come up. F&S can't hold it anymore at that point, but we can do in the process of trying to maintain some temperature control is go ahead and provide a bin and provide ice blankets. Just please make sure that that gets back to the cafeteria manager on a daily basis. So that would be a conversation that you'd want to have with the cafeteria manager. And you could always say, hey, Melissa D'Angelo said that we could go ahead and you could support us with our share table. If you have any questions, please reach out. But can we go ahead and work together to have a hotel pan with some ice blankets on a daily basis provided to us here on our share table, so students can go ahead and put their excess milk and cheese sticks here, and that way students can go ahead and pick them up. And hopefully something like the cheese sticks usually move pretty quickly, but we recognize the milk usually may sit there a little bit longer. And food banks and food pantries, y'all, they really like to take that milk. So if we can figure out how to go ahead and maintain that temperature control and then get it to where then the food bank or food pantry can then go ahead and collect it, that would be ideal. But again, milk doesn't have to be picked up. Milk does not have to be picked up by students. So that's another thing when we're looking at a lot of milk waste in a school. Are students aware that they don't have to be picking up that milk? They really should only be picking up milk if they're going to open it up and drink it, because there are other items that they can go ahead and be picking up. Okay, so I know I've talked a lot about share tables and what that process could look like. So let's go ahead and move on. So I also wanted to share that we are working on increasing our local suppliers. So I wanted to let you guys know that we have 11 local suppliers currently. That ranges from our bread, our milk, our yogurt, our pizza, tortilla chips. One of the tortilla chips are one of the ones that I like to mention because they're being made right in Manassas, and our juice as well. Our bread is coming from Maryland. Our milk is coming from Dairy Made Dairy. They're in Pennsylvania. And the way that we define local is within the state of Virginia and coming from any other state that touches Virginia. So that's how we're defining our local, and whether they qualify into a local supplier. And then at this point, we've been keeping track as well. And a third of our food right now that we're purchasing is local. And we're hoping to increase that. We're keeping track of this and we're seeing it increase every single year. And it's something that we're really proud of. And it's something that we've put into our contracts when we put them out for bid. We are saying that we do want local. We are saying that we want to have sustainable, positive agricultural practices in place. So those are things that we are looking at because we want to ensure that for how big we are and for how many students we're feeding every day, we want to be playing our part in making sure that we're helping and not harming. We're also in pursuit of less plastic. This is something that I know I get a lot of feedback on, and we are working on ensuring that we have fewer individually wrapped items. We are utilizing our wooden utensils. We are really trying to also look at bringing in other types of utensils. We've received a lot of feedback around that, but please recognize that right now our utensils are the best that we can find out there at this moment. We do continue to talk with other manufacturers around, create something new. Create something better for us. We're a huge buyer, and we also talk to really large school systems. We talk to New York, we talk to LA, right? We're talking to Boston, Seattle, Miami, Dade. We're all in pursuit of doing this together, recognizing how big all of us are, and we're supporting one another through these processes. So we are all actively looking at, school nutrition offices as to how to go ahead and find more, to keep in line with those biodegradable options that are out there. We're currently looking at a molded fiber cutlery. It doesn't seem to be right. It's not hitting the mark that we were hoping for because, as we know, with molded fiber, it gets exposed to water and it's just not going to last that long, or it gets exposed to, moisture and it's just not going to last that long. So we might be doing a combination. We're not quite sure, but that is something that we are actively working on. We're looking at how we're packaging our food items. This is feedback that I get pretty often as well. We are, we're working with our cafeteria staff, with our managers, with our food service workers, and saying, we know that you want to put that hamburger inside a plastic wrap. You don't have to put that hamburger inside a plastic wrap. It can go into the paper container, which we call a boat, by the way. You can put it in that boat. It's okay. So it's just around those pieces as well that to have your support and recognizing that that's what we're trying to do. And if you happen to see it, reach out to me, let me know. I can have that conversation. And then also recognizing that that's really what we're trying to move towards. And if you happen to see it, thanking your manager as well can also go a really long way. They love to be recognized when they are making those changes, and and you guys have recognized that. And then our salad bars, it was one of the pictures I had right there at the very beginning to show that that is one way that we're also trying to go ahead and reduce food waste, because providing all those different colors and fruits and vegetables and students being able to choose just the amount that they're hopefully going to eat, getting exposure to all of that, recognizing how food comes, right? Fresh fruit and vegetables, how it's comes, right? I don't know if you guys have heard, right, the studies around where students don't know at times where milk comes from, right? It comes from the grocery store, right? It never comes from a cow. It comes from the grocery store. It comes from the refrigerator. We want students to recognize where their food is coming from. And so we're really proud of our salad bars, so students can see the natural version of fruits and vegetables. So next, we're going to go ahead and talk about sort of 3 food items and walk through the conversation as to like how we're working towards reducing our waste. So next slide. Right, so let's just talk about apples, right? So our apples are locally sourced. And that's, of course, their first step, right? We're looking at always fruits and vegetables. Where are they coming from? Knowing that we have that salad bar on every line every day. And we don't have that apple. It's a whole apple, so we don't have it at this point, right? On the salad bar, it's not individually wrapped. It's not in those individual packages. They're not sliced. They're not in there, right? So we're saving that plastic as well. That's what the IW means, not individually wrapped. And then it's going through the OVS process where students go ahead and they're able to choose how much they're going to go ahead and eat. We're not forcing them and serving them and saying, you're going to take this half cup fruits, for instance. And then because it's a whole apple, it can go onto the share table or into another food donation or food rescue effort. Next slide. Let's talk about our bagels. So again, our bagels are locally sourced. They're not IW, so they're no longer, they used to be, but they're no longer in an individually wrapped plastic bag. They're not in that sealed plastic bag. We now get them in bulk. And then we're also working on cross-utilizing that bagel. So we're trying to work, we get feedback from students, we work on food tastings, we spend time with students, we get feedback on what's working. We were told, by the way, that our biscuit was dry. They were like, stop providing us breakfast sandwiches on a biscuit. We don't like it. The biscuit is dry. And so we said, okay, we'll try bagels. So we went ahead and we provided different options for them. And they helped us create some bagel sandwiches. They're going to be hitting the line this year. And then, so that's student approved, student feedback, everything came along with that. And then we try really hard to just make sure that we're not going to bring a bagel in just for one item. Whenever we look at our food items, we're not bringing in a food item for just one thing if we can help it, because that's not good menu planning. It's similar to what you'd be doing in your home, for instance, right? If you're going to bring in that one special item, but you're always going to have a pantry of stuff, right? That hopefully you're cross-utilizing because you're going to go ahead and you're going to save money. You're going to go ahead and be utilizing that. You're not going to have to go to the store multiple times to pick it up, etc. It's good menu planning along the way and getting that student feedback. Then, of course, we're able to enact offer versus serve in that. However, right, to just be completely transparent, it can't go on the share table because it's not a unpackaged or packaged item. For instance, it's something that's already been created. And so a student is not, you're not going to want another student to pick that up. So it's not shareable. So it can't go on the share table. It can't be collected and donated. Next slide. And our milk, right? Our milk as well, it's locally sourced. It comes in a recyclable carton, from my understanding, right? I know that was something that came up at one point, and I know we're going to be talking about recycling later. And so we're happy about that. Again, you get to enact offer versus serve. Students who are going to drink the milk should be picking up the milk. Students who are not going to drink the milk, hopefully are not picking up the milk. And then you can have it on a share table with some temperature control as well. So that was just sort of taking you guys through three food items and how at every point we're trying to figure out ways to go ahead and reduce the waste associated with that food item. And last but not least, on the next slide, how to connect with us, right? Reach out. If you have an idea, share it. Just reach out, email me or Brittany Smith. Brittany's not able to be here today. This is her week that she's taking off for her summer vacation. Bring us in the conversation. Please tell our staff as well if you recognize that they're reducing waste, right? And their waste efforts. Please let them know, right? That you see them. And if you have any ideas, reach out to them, but also be aware that they're most likely going to reach out to us and say, can I do this? Is this okay? And yes, right, we can figure out ways to work together to move this forward because it is important to us to be reducing our waste along the way. And I think that's it. So I think now there are questions, and there were a lot. I was trying not to get distracted. A little window would pop up, and I kept trying to not read them while I was talking.
You did a great job at both presenting new information and ignoring the distraction. So we'll go through first, for anyone that wasn't here right at the beginning, we are recording this session and we'll be sharing the slides both on Schoology in the coming days. And now for all your questions. Are students able to take more than one of any of the components? Can they take an entree fruit, veg, and a second fruit, for example?
Yes. Minimum is that half cup fruit. Yes. If students want to pile up the fruits and vegetables on their tray, yes. However, right, hopefully they're getting as much as they're going to eat, right? We try to maintain the saying of take what you can eat and eat what you take. So yes, they can, and especially if they're in the middle of, having a huge growth spurt or something, or perhaps maybe experiencing food insecurity. Yes, they can. They cannot take an extra entree, but they can get unlimited fruits and vegetables.
Can they decline any of the must select? So could they decline an entree and take extra fruits and vegetables?
So when it comes to lunch, for instance, if we're talking about lunch, the minimum is that half cup of fruit and or vegetable. They could take a fruit and a vegetable, but then they have to take a third component. So there are three components to be considered a complete meal at breakfast. So say, for instance, they wanted to get half a cup of carrots, a whole apple, and then they wanted to pick up the pretzel. That would work because that's three components. That's considered a complete meal. Um, there's a variety of variations that could come out of that. But yes, they could pick up as long as it's three. We have to offer the five, they have to pick up at least three. And that one of those being at least half a cup of fruit or vegetable. Hopefully that made sense.
Yes, and the yogurt, cheese sticks, and milk, the clarification was you don't have to have a fridge if you're collecting those. You can have the ice tray that you mentioned, the ice blanket, and if it was just going to last through the lunch periods. Is that correct?
Yes. And then if you don't have some sort of a temperature control after that, then I'm going to really suggest that you guys toss it.
And the next question, I think, is for both of us. Have principals been notified about all schools being required to have this? I will tell you, we are in the process. And so Melissa and I were talking before you all came in from the waiting room about what that was going to look like. Today, several of us from the Get to Green team were at the Leaders Need to Know. It's the mandatory training for all principals and assistant principals. And during that training, it's part of the updates they received from curriculum and instruction that by probably the end of Q1, they would have to have a food share table, and then it looks a number of different ways. So they've got it on that end. And then also we'll be sending out Food and Nutrition Services will be sending out at least an infogram, maybe an actiongram, letting them know that that's the expectation. So yes, your administrators will know. Next one, can packaged food from home be collected?
You can collect it, but not on the share table that's in the cafeteria. So we've worked with other schools that have asked a similar question. And so what I am able to provide guidance around is on our food that we provide, right? Because then I can go ahead and ensure that that food has been maintained, the integrity of the food has been maintained and that it's food safe. After that, I can't guarantee that anything coming from home has gone through the same processes. So what we have another elementary school doing, from my understanding, is they collect food from home in another bin in the hallway or by the front office, and then that's available for students to go ahead and pick up.
Interesting workaround. A shout out to you for the newer bamboo silverware towards the end of the year and how the scoop of the spoon got better as the year went on. So thank you for that.
That's feedback giving to the manufacturer. I wish I could take credit for that. If I could figure out a way to go into that business, I would, y'all, because I think that that could be a huge thing. But yeah, we're trying. We're trying. Thanks.
Another question was, a lot of the snack items seem to be plastic heavy. Any way we can reach out to the big name brands like the dried cranberries and see if they could switch to a biodegradable plastic or packaging? They could use us as a tester district.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I love that. So I just got back from San Antonio early this morning, and I was in a summit with PepsiCo, and PepsiCo provides a number of our snacks, and they are actively working. So my point is manufacturers are aware of this. They are actively working on their packaging. They're trying to create a biodegradable, natural biodegradable packaging. Everybody's aware of this. People are trying, people are looking at this. And again, that's why for us, we're happy to be working with PepsiCo and be getting our snacks from them because we recognize that they're willing to do this. They are also leading leading the charge, but manufacturers are falling in line and they're beginning to get there. So, I mean, that's something that, in the craisins, for instance, that's another conversation. We're not going to be seeing those as much coming up this year because they are high in added sugars. So we're looking at other alternatives. And when we're looking at other alternatives, we're having those conversations as well. The option would be then if we got it in bulk, we then still have to figure out a way to package it. And then right now, the reality is plastic is cheap. So then we'd have to figure out some sort of a paper container. Students can't see it. It's just not as appealing. So those are all the things that we have to take into account as well. But yes, manufacturers are aware and we are having those conversations. And yeah, maybe we will be a test school soon for some of these. But be aware that PepsiCo, if you guys want to Google them and everything that they're providing out there, they are looking at also on the commercial side, the non-K-12 food system side as well. So they're a great organization.
All right. Next is a clarification about an apple being shareable since most people eat the skin.
Most people eat the skin.
So like if I'm part of our thing for share tables is that it's clean. I haven't taken a bite of it and put it on, or like the bagel sandwich we said could not go on to a share table, but an apple can. Can you explain the logic behind that?
So because it hasn't been eaten, and it hasn't been unwrapped, and because it's still consumable in its whole form. Hopefully that helps.
So back to the lunch question, 2 fruits and a grain will work, or does it have to be 3 different components?
2 fruits and a grain. Nope, it would not work. You see, let me think this through. See, this is what happens. Okay. It would have to be, they could still get 2 fruits, but you'd still want to pick up another component. So 2 fruits, a grain, and then a vegetable, a milk, something like that. Yes. So that one would not work, that example.
And the next couple of questions go together. So who reminds students about what they need to take for the lunch line? And someone else asked, is there a video available that could play for students at the beginning of the year about how the lunch line works and what they have to take and can choose?
Yes, yes, and yes. So our staff are trained every single year on this. And so we train our managers when they come back. We have a back to school year training for our managers. They get that training. They then go and do turnaround training for their food service workers, especially their cashiers. So there's that. We also have signage that's mandated by the USDA that we have to have on our lines. We are also in the process of putting together some videos for students. What we then need is your help to get it out. And so whenever I talk to Get to Green leads at schools, they're like, send me anything that you want to get out and I'll make sure that it gets in our morning news, etc. So that's one avenue that we're really planning on leaning hard on this year to get that out. We've gone out to schools, we've had students involved in creating these videos, voiceover, areas like that we're really trying to increase awareness with our students and then also our staff. So yes, it's coming. So thank you for that question.
And as it comes, it will be shared with you all as Zero Waste Liaison in the Trellis and on Schoology. And yes, it will be added to the Zero Waste Toolkit. So several of you also offered some suggestions for the plastics in the cafeteria, and Allie will be speaking to some of the recycling things that happen. And the TerraCycle boxes, we might have some exciting news on the horizon about schools receiving a TerraCycle box to at least start off this adventure. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your immense knowledge and the transparency that you always bring to this professional development. I can speak for everyone I know on the Get to Green team, our internal team, that we learn every single time that we get together with you. And we're truly thankful for this collaboration. And if we have more questions from the exit ticket, we will be reaching out.
Yeah, I do have to run soon. I will hang out for a little bit longer. I do really quickly though, Chrissy, if you don't mind. I also want to have I want to make a shout out to Elliot Pomper. He is a rising senior at Langley. He worked on these slides with me. He's an intern that I have this summer. He has put together a club at Langley called Fruitful, and he has donated over 9,000 pieces of fruit that he's collected from our cafeteria and donated it to Share McLean. He also helped me be able to get some other food banks and food pantries on board with some other donations. So if you guys are interested to see how a student is taking the lead and how successful they are, and to have, maybe inspire other students at your schools, I have a contact for you, Elliot Pomper. He's amazing. And, he's working with us. He's not here today, unfortunately, but, if you have any questions and you want to know how to help recruit some students, he's creating a student guide as well that we'll hopefully have available for you all to share with your students. Thank you.
Thank you. And now that was a lot of information, both in the chat and out loud. We are going to do a waterfall chat jot thought. So I'm going to ask you right now in the chat, but don't hit enter. Type in what is one new piece of learning from our session so far. I'm going to set a timer for 30 seconds. And when our timer stops, I'm going to ask you to click enter, and there will be a waterfall of new learning. All right, go. Yes, there's so much new vocabulary. We know for every new field that we're in, we learn new vocabulary with it. So I'm grateful for that. All right, to shift gears, we're staying in the cafeteria, but now we touched on what recycling might look like in the cafeteria. And Ali Colhane, our senior manager on the facility side of things, is going to share some things you might do with recycling.
All right, so we do have a recycling regulation in FCPS that requires all schools to recycle. So currently what we are able to recycle is plastics 1, 2, and 5, cardboard, paper, and aluminum and tin cans. So we are in the process of requesting proposals for a new recycling contract that will be going into effect sometime in the next year. And we're expecting that everything that we currently recycle, we will still be able to recycle. But we'll have to see. There might be some new things that we're able to recycle as well, which would be really exciting. So I think the biggest thing for you to keep in mind starting the school year is just to put out a reminder to your school community about what things are recyclable. And if you need more recycling posters to post around your school, you can order them on the Get to Green website under recycling. You can find links to order more posters from TMPC, or you can also find a PDF so that you can print smaller copies of the poster yourself. And then that is also a resource that will always be the most up to date with the latest recycling guidance in FCPS. And as Chrissy mentioned, Kate, am I allowed to share this information about the TerraCycle boxes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're on order.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So we got through the plastic bag tax that Fairfax County has, we were able to get funding for every school to get a hard to recycle TerraCycle box. So we will be distributing those at the Get to Green Leader kickoff sessions over in the next few weeks. And if hopefully you can join us there and get it. And if not, we will find another way to get your box to your school. So we're really excited. I think Laura mentioned in the chat that that's something that they've been doing for candy wrappers. And so there are other, options out there for things that we can't recycle when in FCPS that there are ways that we can use our Get to Green funding to pay to help divert those materials. So obviously we would rather just reduce waste, but we're also happy to have ways that we can divert recyclable items. And I think that's everything for recycling. Now we're going to
Yeah,
switch
Allie,
gears.
just want to make sure that folks
yeah.
know, I typed it in the chat, you can read it, but the boxes, they're specifically designed. We had some, over the course of the year, through the superintendent's advisory committee from, schools, we heard from school staff concerns about materials that could be recyclable, but just can't go in single stream recycling because of what happens on the market end. But they are recyclable materials, and many of you are familiar with TerraCycle. And what we heard the most was about markers, laminated paper. And I don't know where I went. I'm in a shadow right now, but I don't know what happened to me on my video.
Witness protection.
Yes, yes. So specifically, these boxes are going to collect laminated paper or rigid paper or laminated paper. So rigid plastic, soft plastics, which is what we can't put in our recycling bins right now, the blue bins. Pens, staplers, markers kept coming up all year. We heard that. Art supplies, staplers and scissors. Those are the types of items that will be able to be collected in this box. And Allie is correct. Every school will get a box. We're still working on how we're going to distribute those. And we'll leave it up to the schools to determine where they want to place that. And I do plan to send an actiongram out with that when that time comes so that everybody is aware of it. But just making sure you all know that and we're going to size them based on the size of the school. And that's going to be the waste stream that we're going to focus on. The box will have a custom made sticker on it made by one of my interns this summer. And then lovely Leslie in the Get to Green office is going to also make that available, extra resources for you through Schoology or Google. We're not sure. So you'll have additional resources if you should need them. I know I've been exposed, David. My witness protection's not working.
Yeah, so
Thanks, Kate.
the box that we're distributing might not be the best fit for cafeteria waste, but you can use your Get to Green fund this year to buy. They do have a box that's for more of like food packaging that you could choose to purchase in addition.
Great question about, so the boxes will be arriving with an affixed return address mailing on it. So all you got to do is have somebody drop it and give it to a UPS driver. So once you fill it, pack it up as much as you can. You'll just need the UPS driver who visits your school twice and 3 times a week to take it away with them.
Right. Thank you. And now as we think about the food that cannot be either going on food share tables, what can we do with that food when we have it left over? Our own Karen Taylor, our school support specialist, is going to speak to that.
Thanks, Chrissy. Hi, everyone. I'm sure most of you know that a lot of our students have expressed great interest in composting food scraps and food waste at school. And so their awareness and the challenges that are presented have been right in line with their increased awareness. And so I just want to go over some of the ways that we can address this on site in schools and also give you some backgrounds to doing it effectively. So the 3 main methods of composting food scraps in schools are on-site composting in bins on school grounds, and worm composting or vermiculture, which is going to be addressed by my colleague Rachel in the next section. And the other one would be diversion to a commercial compost facility. So those are basically the 3 ways that we're addressing food scrap waste on school grounds. It does provide a great way to encourage students to manage their own scraps and take responsibility for the waste stream at their school, along with understanding the process of decomposition and that relationship to replenishing and enriching these soil on their own school grounds. So if you could move to the next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. Okay. Oh, wait. Whoop. Go back. Sorry. Okay. I wanted to add this slide in because sometimes we talk about composting, but we really forget about what compost is and what we are using it for. So as a gardener myself, and for all of you fellow gardeners who are out there, you know that compost is our friend. And it basically is all of that organic material that we're generating as food scraps and yard waste as well, that will be decomposed by microorganisms, and it lends itself to improving the soil quality and promotes healthier and more resilient plant growth. It improves the soil structure and texture. It enhances the nutrient availability to plants. It increases water retention, and it can decrease erosion. So it is a wonderful thing to have on our school grounds and in our school gardens. Now you can move on to the next slide. Thanks. Okay, so how do we do this in the cafeteria? I know that a lot of people are interested in doing this. It does take some planning. There's no doubt about it. And it really starts with having a supported and dedicated team. And that it should really include your students, but it probably is going to depend on some other individuals in your school as well. And they may be some people who are in your cafeteria. You may have a custodial personnel who is on board with helping you out with this. There may be a cafeteria hostess at the elementary level that might be willing to help as well. But it does take a coordinated effort on the part of a number of people to make this successful. The other thing is proper collection of your items. One of the things that I ran into when I was doing this as a school-based person was trying to make sure that the waste stream doesn't get contaminated. Because on site at schools, we're not able to compost some of the things that a commercial composter would be able to take on. We really are not able to compost things like proteins, meat, cheeses, yogurt, and fats. So we want to keep those out of the waste stream. Our composting bins are not going to get a high enough temperature to effectively decompose that material, and you can wind up with all kinds of unpleasant problems as a result of it. So the proper collection and the balance of the materials is important. And of course, having the space in your cafeteria and the time to effectively make sure that those materials are getting sorted. And the other thing is going to be proper monitoring, not only in the collection process, but what happens once those materials are transported to the composter outside of your cafeteria building, outside of the building. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. The other thing that I want to just, I know we've talked about this in some other sessions, but I want to just review some of the basics about composting. Again, I think sometimes people forget about the balance and how important that is. We look a lot at what's coming through the cafeteria, through the waste stream in the cafeteria, and that portion of it is going to be your green material. It's very high in nitrogen, but it does require the brown material, which is your carbon source, in order for composting to happen effectively. The other is going to be having the right content of air, moisture, and lots of air circulation. You have to make sure you're in the right location and having the right container, and all of those components are addressed in some of the materials that we have available through Get to Green. They're available on Schoology, and they're available also in the Garden Guide. Goes into a little bit more detail in terms of how to layer your compost, the timing involved, and how to address any problems in balancing your compost if that should happen. So I'm not going to go into any of that here because all of that information is available to you on through those resources. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. So this is another thing that is available through the Zero Waste Toolkit. It goes through all of the steps for creating a composting program at your school. And I'd really have to emphasize more than anything else, it's like all the other things that we embark upon, it's planning and starting small. I have found the most successful composting programs do start with maybe suggesting just a few items to compost. It really aids in keeping your waste stream from becoming too contaminated, and gets students used to the idea of sorting through what they're disposing of at lunchtime. It is doable, but I do want to also emphasize that you're going to be doing this on a small scale. We do not have the capacity to compost all of the waste that's being generated in the cafeteria. But I do think that implementing a composting program in your cafeteria really gets students on board with paying attention to what they're eating, what they're not eating, and what they're disposing of. And it just raises awareness. And if they can engage in the process of not only collecting it, but creating the compost and having that opportunity to move that compost into their own gardens, it really reinforces the whole cycle of this process. And there is less of a disconnect between our food waste and what's going on in our gardens, and how it impacts the earth. So again, you're invited to look at all of these components. They're going to be different for every school should you decide to embark upon it. But again, I would emphasize that the planning part is really important, deciding who is going to be responsible for collecting and monitoring the food scraps, and also what happens to the food scraps after they are decomposed and moving them into the garden, which frankly is kind of the most exciting part that I've witnessed. It's great to see students making that connection. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Oh, and I'm going to pass it on to Rachel.
Hey everybody, we're going to be talking about worms. So when you were thinking about worms, we're going to be referring to it as vermicomposting. And let's start with why you might want to think about doing that with the next slide. So why worms, and why consider this method as a starting place? Or if you're already composting and you're not doing this yet, why look into doing worms? So a lot of times this is going to be a lower scale situation of composting. And so it's going to end up being lower cost, and it's really, really hands-on. And let's just be honest, worms, they kind of give people the feels, right? Whether it's good feelings or icky feelings, and that inherently is going to be really engaging, and getting people over that like messy, icky factor can be really making the whole experience more memorable. And so, I mean, look at the picture on the slide. That's a worm's mouth. A lot of students don't even understand that worms don't have teeth. And so they are going to be all about the process of how worms are breaking down this material and bringing it back into our garden and outdoor spaces a lot more when we're engaging them with these cool little critters. And there's a lot of really great entry points that are cross-curricular that we're going to see in the next slide. So I'm not going to read through all of this, but I do want you to notice that there's so many different ways you can facilitate a worm bin, whether that is with your class, or maybe you want to share this across a team of teachers who are teaching the same content at the secondary level or at the elementary level. Maybe it's with your grade level team. But consider that worms, you can look at them and think about it from a science perspective, and you can do it by tracking their numbers, tracking how much food is remaining in a bin. A lot of really great graphing possibilities with worms, the ways that you can write about worms, you can draw about worms. They're pretty weird and really, really fun. And then there's all the way to, let's think about how we could design the worm bin itself. This could be managed by a club, but what I do want you to think about is that it's not one way to do this, and it is a lot easier to share a bin, but it is important that somebody or some groups of somebody are responsible for tracking and monitoring it. So there'll be an opportunity towards the end of this to be able to ask clarifying questions, but maybe you possibly have some entry points that you've tried if you've done a worm bin, and feel free to add those into the chat as we go. Next slide. And so how does it work? What are some ways you can set up a worm bin? Well, the easiest way actually could be a DIY worm bin, and the garden guide has this great visual to the top right about how you can just have a plastic bin and you could create your own. Really, what's important is it does need to have some airflow, but you don't want the worms to escape. There are these pre-made bins that you can purchase. The one on the bottom left is got a tray system. And so what's nice about that is you can see the layers and see the worms decompose over time and what that decomposition process could look like, make connections to soil, ecosystems, and all those great learning factors. Even temperature would change over the process of composting, moisture levels. And then bottom right is a general flow system. So instead of having the layers, they're just like naturally there. And so to be able to see further composted material that you have to dig deeper. But what's really crazy about a worm bin is that you're seeing the process really hands-on right there and on a small scale, and possibly it could be in your classroom or outside. Classroom is maybe possibly more accessible, and so let's talk about kind of what materials you would need to be able to do it in either fashion. First of all, it's recommended for a worm bin to have red wiggler worms. That's a specific type of worm that is really made to digest the compostable material very fast. And you could get worms from outside, but those night crawlers or earthworms, they tend to be escape artists and they are not necessarily as good at living in a more shallow bin. They like to dig deeper. And so you could collect your own worms, but it is recommended to at least mix in some red wigglers. Red wigglers are something that you can find in some stores. They also are somehow purchasable on Amazon, and I've had success with that. Then worms require some bedding. Instead of having leaf matter from outside, which many compost bins outside might have as the brown material, it is recommended that you consider having shredded paper. And this is so that you don't add extra outdoor bugs into your classroom setting. And even though that could be a fun ecosystem, that could be a big of a gnat type of disaster in your classroom. And as someone who has experienced that, it is not recommended. And so I would highly recommend the fun process of shredding paper, whether by hand or a paper shredder. And that makes really good bedding for the worms. They do need their moisture checked on the regular. And so the whole process is really great for kids to have almost like a class pet where they are checking on the worms. Do they have the right moisture level? So you can just grab a bit of the soil, which is mostly like paper shreddings and some composted stuff. And yes, you can get in there with your hands and test, is it too wet? Is it too dry? And really track that, which is really, really great for students. And then for adding food, worms can eat a lot of food, but you can overfeed them and you can underfeed them. So that's a learning process too. But it can be something that you put in strategic parts of the worm bin and actually observe the material decompose. Now, there are certain foods that are not meant to go in a compost bin, as Karen mentioned, and that's really important to check what those things are. And a lot of pre-made worm bins have a really great list of what those are. It's also in the garden guide. But if you don't follow that list, if you add too much citrus, you might actually kill all your worms, which would be very disappointing for you and your students. And you also could end up with some smelly matter, things not decomposing properly. But in all honesty, it's really a great process. And we'll see on the next slide how we can think about the care over time. So I think sometimes when we think about like I'm having a live critter in my classroom or I'm sharing it across a group of teachers in a grade level or on a content team or in my club, you might worry like, what do I do when we're not here? And so honestly, worms are really good at surviving. They don't do great when it's too hot or too cold, like all of us. And so a lot of times you just have to check on them once over a longer break. But on a shorter break, if you fed them really well and you made sure the moisture's set up right, you'd probably be fine on a shorter break. But for something like summer break, it's really too hot and really it's too long. And so often a lot of schools just decide to like, let's have these worms go into our garden spaces and give all the wonderful compost we've made into the appropriate places so that it benefits all of our other projects that we might be doing on our outdoor learning spaces. So even if you had a short-term bin, it's a pretty memorable experience. And hopefully, if you haven't tried it yet, you think about doing it. There were some pictures where their kids were like using little spoons. They're not eating those worms. They're just using them in case they might not have been as comfortable to touch them with their hands. So, if you have not yet shared an entry point, if you've done worm bins, please feel free to add it into the chat now if you have any tips or tricks that you yourself have had with worms. And then we're going to go to the next slide. And if you're someone who may be more on the fence, or you've tried it or whatnot, if you would like to now ask your questions in the chat. What are you thinking about, both with composting in general, from what Karen was sharing, or about worms? What are some of your questions?
One question is there an odor associated with doing this indoors?
If you have a properly balanced worm bin, there should be no odor. If it is too wet, it will start to smell because there's going to be decomposition happening without enough oxygen, and things will begin to get funky. If you had too much food in the bin, things will start to get funky. So that could be something actually to track because it should be odor free.
Thank you. And if you come up with more questions as we go on through this last section together, then you can also ask them in the exit ticket. It's sounding like many of you have positive experiences with wormies. We love that. All right, next slide, and we're going to invite Karen back to talk about something we haven't really shared in a PD before, and it's really leveraging the time with students in the cafeteria for environmental stewardship. Karen, share your ideas.
I'm back. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Chrissy. Sometimes we forget about the opportunity we have to work with students in the cafeteria during lunchtime. And believe it or not, it can be a lot of fun. And I'll just give you an idea of how I got going on this. Way back when the county changed their recycling guidelines, um, the students in the cafeteria, and I believe they were 5th and 6th graders at the time, noticed the dramatic difference. We had been quite proud of ourselves for all of the things we were recycling, and all of a sudden we went from bins that were overflowing to ones that were not even a third full. And I will tell you, they were shocked. And they were upset, and their first inclination was to protest. And while I agreed with them, I happened to be in the cafeteria when this was happening, and they were having this discussion. And I posed the question as to, well, I think that there is a time and place for protests, but what can we do right here at our school in this time and place? And believe it or not, this was really the beginning of our green team at our school. This group of students were so passionate about it, they began to brainstorm and come up with some ideas about what we could do to, first of all, reduce our waste and do a better job of recycling. And this led to coming up with things that we could do in the cafeteria. And in this picture, you can see one of the things that they decided to do was start messaging on the bulletin board that was available. And we used that in a number of ways. This was one where they started talking about things that were how things could be properly recycled. But we went on from there. Chris, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So you can see it got a little bit more elaborate. We went, we're still talking about zero waste, and we actually began working with our art teacher who helped us design some of the components for these bulletin boards, and the students actually created them and did all of the drawing and coloring and whatnot. The other thing that we did along the lines of looking at food and carbon footprint was we put up a big map of the world on that bulletin board and invited students to begin looking at the labels on their food and determining where it had come from. And they were invited to come and take their stickers. A lot of fruits had stickers from different countries, and they would find it on the map and leave their sticker there. So we are looking at geography now and looking at what we're eating for lunch and looking at where it came from. We also began to track by using just threads from wherever that point of origin was to where our school was and figuring out how far that food had traveled. It was really impactful. We collected a tremendous amount of data, and it really got students engaged in a discussion during the lunch period, and kept them engaged with one another. The other thing that we did was we started collecting data. As I was saying, we were collecting data in terms of how far our food had traveled, but we started looking at what was happening in the cafeteria with regard to single-use plastics, and particularly whether or not students were bringing reusable water bottles to lunch. So we had clipboards, and they would start collecting data, and we did this maybe for 6 weeks or so, but it was such a powerful way to engage with how is data collected and what is it used for. And even though it was not a statistically significant sample, we did compile it, and we started to talk about how we could track how that changed over time, whether or not any behavior was being influenced by the fact that the level of awareness was being raised. This also led to our ketchup packet campaign. And students began asking questions like, well, oh my goodness, at the time, we had the salad bar in the cafeteria, and we had the dressing jugs. So students could just pump amounts of dressing for their salad. But a couple students noticed that we were still using single-use ketchup and mustard packets, and wondered, well, why don't we have the larger containers for those condiments? So they started collecting empty ketchup packets to see if it would be cost effective to transfer from the single use to the larger containers. And this actually wound up being something that they were advertising on our morning news. We actually had a student dress up in a hot dog costume, and it generated a tremendous amount of participation and awareness. So I just give you these examples of some of the things that you can do easily in a cafeteria, and actually you don't have to be there the whole time, except maybe to get it off the ground a little bit. And it doesn't have to be in every single lunch period. It can be maybe 1 or 2 grades. It can just be for a month or maybe 2 months or whatever. But it's a great opportunity to raise awareness and to really get a lot of student engagement. And they have the time at lunch to come up with these ideas and have discussions amongst themselves. So it's a great opportunity to do some leveraging. And I would love to hear if anybody else has ideas of anything that they've seen happen in their cafeterias, and you can post that in the chat. I think it's just a fun thing to share, and we're all looking for ideas to keep students engaged and not up to mischief in the lunchroom.
All right, thank you so much. And hopefully that might have just sparked some ideas, which is what we're always hoping for in these sessions. And speaking of that, if you go on to the next slide, Allie, we want to make sure we allow time for you to connect with one another, to share successes and ideas that are working at your school, maybe share challenges that you have. In this slide deck, we'll be going into breakouts, and you'll find your room in this slide deck, and you'll see it is set up like a menu with appetizers, entrees, and desserts. So our appetizers are your ideas for getting started. The main course is the student-driven action that you either have an idea to try or that you've seen work. And finally, dessert. How are you celebrating the sweet successes that you have in the cafeteria? We'll have about 15 minutes in breakout rooms to share the ideas and the great things happening. So again, you'll choose the slide that corresponds with your breakout room and record your ideas there. After the session, I will combine this slide deck with the slides that we've been using, and that way you can see each other's, because I know you can't be in every room at once. I'll also be pausing the recording.